You gold-digging whore! Beatrice Hayes's hand cracked across Vivian's face with savage force, sending her stumbling backward into the dresser. The divorce papers scattered across the marble floor like accusations. 3 years of playing dress-up in my son's bed ends tonight. Beatrice seized Vivian's wrist, twisting it until she cried out. Sign these papers and crawl back to whatever gutter you came from. Preston stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face carved from stone. He watched his mother brutalize his wife and said nothing. Did nothing. Just stared with cold, dead eyes. Beatrice shoved Vivian toward the bed where a pen waited. Sign, now, or I'll make you wish you had. Before we continue, smash that subscribe button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Trust me, what happens next will shock you. Vivian's hands trembled as she stared at the papers scattered across her silk comforter. The words blurred together legal jargon that translated to one simple truth: she was being erased. 3 years of marriage reduced to signatures and clauses. I said sign them! Beatrice's voice cracked like a whip. Vivian looked up at Preston, searching his face for any trace of the man who'd once promised her forever. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder. He wouldn't even look at her. Preston, Vivian whispered, her voice breaking. Please, just talk to me. Tell me what I did wrong. What you did wrong? Beatrice laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. You were born wrong, sweetheart. Wrong family, wrong background, wrong everything. You were a mistake my son made when he was feeling charitable. Mother, that's enough. Preston's voice was flat, but he still didn't move from the doorway. No, it's not enough, Beatrice snapped. She needs to understand her place, which is anywhere but here. She turned back to Vivian, her eyes glittering with malice. Tiffany Sterling arrives tomorrow. You remember Tiffany, don't you? From the country club, blonde, educated from a family that actually matters, she and Preston have been getting reacquainted. The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. Tiffany Sterling, the woman who'd been circling Preston at every charity function for the past 6 months, her hand always lingering too long on his arm, her laugh too bright, too eager. You've been seeing her, Vivian said quietly, looking at Preston. It wasn't a question. He finally met her eyes. We've had dinner a few times. A few times. Vivian's voice was hollow. While you were married to me. Don't be dramatic, Beatrice interjected. Preston was simply exploring his options. Something he should have done before he shackled himself to you. Now sign the papers. You're getting nothing, by the way. No alimony, no settlement, nothing. The prenup you signed was very clear. Vivian remembered that prenup. She'd been so in love, so blinded by Preston's attention, that she'd signed it without reading it properly. Her hands had been shaking then too, but from excitement, not devastation. I need to call my lawyer, Vivian said, reaching for her phone. Beatrice's hand shot out, snatching the phone away. You don't have a lawyer, dear. And even if you did, what would you pay them with? The credit cards are canceled. The bank accounts are frozen. Everything in this penthouse belongs to the Hayes family, including that ridiculous wardrobe Preston bought you. You canceled my cards, Vivian's voice rose. Those were for household expenses, for you to waste our money on spa days and shopping trips, Beatrice interrupted. Well, that gravy train just derailed. Sign the papers, pack 1 suitcase of your personal items, and get out. You have until tomorrow morning. Preston shifted in the doorway. Mother, we agreed she'd have a week. I've changed my mind, Beatrice said coldly. Why prolong the inevitable? Besides, Tiffany wants to redecorate. She has exquisite taste, unlike some people. Vivian stood up slowly. Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself to remain steady. I loved you, she said to Preston, her voice raw. I gave up everything for you. My job, my apartment, my independence. I learned which fork to use and how to small talk with your business associates. I smiled through your mother's insults and your father's indifference. I stood by you when the Chicago deal fell through and everyone was calling you reckless. How touching, Beatrice drawled. The martyred wife speech. Should I get my violin, Preston? Vivian continued, ignoring Beatrice. I loved you. Did that mean nothing? For a moment, something flickered across Preston's face. Regret, guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold distance. It's over, Vivian. We want different things. You're not happy here, and I'm not happy with you. Let's just end this cleanly." "Cleanly," Vivian repeated. The word tasted bitter. "Is that what you call this? Sign the papers." Preston said, his voice harder now. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Vivian looked down at the documents again. Her vision swam tears threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give Beatrice the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Where's your pen?" she asked quietly. Beatrice's smile was triumphant. She produced a gold pen from her Hermes bag, holding it out like a trophy. "Right here, dear." Vivian took the pen. It was heavy, expensive, probably worth more than her first car. She clicked it once, twice the sound, unnaturally loud in the silent bedroom. Then she bent over the papers and began to sign. Her hand moved mechanically across each page. Vivian Marie Hayes. The name she'd taken with such joy 3 years ago now felt like chains being unlocked. With each signature, she was shedding a piece of the life she'd tried so hard to build. "There," Vivian said, finally dropping the pen onto the last page. "It's done." Beatrice snatched up the papers, immediately clutching them to her chest like precious treasure. "Finally, some common sense from you. Now pack your things and be gone by morning, and don't try to take anything that doesn't belong to you. I've had the security cameras checked. If a single piece of jewelry goes missing, I'll have you arrested for theft." "Everything here belongs to Preston," Vivian said dully. "I understand." "Good," Beatrice said. She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Vivian, do try to maintain some dignity when you go. Don't make a scene. Don't contact Preston. Don't show up at family events hoping for another chance. Just disappear quietly, like you were never here at all." With that, Beatrice swept out of the room, her heels clicking away down the hallway. Preston lingered in the doorway for a moment longer. "Vivian, he started. "Get out," Vivian said softly. "I just want you to know that—" "Get out!" The words tore from her throat, raw and broken. "You got what you wanted. Now leave me alone." Preston's jaw tightened. For a second she thought he might actually say something real, something honest, but then he turned and walked away, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Vivian stood alone in the bedroom that had never truly felt like hers. The cream walls, the designer furniture, the view of Chicago's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, all of it was just borrowed time. She'd been living in someone else's life, playing a role she was never meant to keep. She pulled out her phone, the old one she'd kept hidden in her nightstand drawer, the one from before Preston, before the Hayes family, before she'd tried to become someone she wasn't. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts, past names she hadn't called in 3 years, friends she'd lost touch with, a life she'd abandoned. Then she found the number, the one she'd deleted and restored a dozen times over the years, always keeping it just in case. Her finger hovered over the screen. "Call him," a voice whispered in her head. "End this pretense. Go home." But pride held her back. 3 years ago she'd made her choice. She'd walked away from her family, from her grandfather's stern warnings and her aunt's disappointed looks. They'd told her Preston Hayes was wrong for her, that his family would never accept her, that she was making a terrible mistake. They'd been right about everything. Vivian set the phone down and began to pack. One suitcase, Beatrice had said. She pulled her old duffel bag from the back of the closet, the one she'd brought with her when she'd first moved in back when Preston had laughed and said she wouldn't need it because he'd buy her proper luggage. She packed her oldest clothes first, the jeans she'd worn waitressing, the simple cotton dresses, the comfortable sweaters. None of the designer labels Beatrice had insisted she wear to look appropriate for a Hayes wife. Those could stay. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Heard the news. Welcome back to the real world. Hope the fall doesn't hurt too much." Vivian stared at the message. Already, word was already spreading. The Hayes family's PR machine must be working overtime, spinning the story, controlling the narrative. Poor Preston, trapped in a marriage with a gold digger. Thank goodness he saw the light before she could do more damage. Another text came through, then another. Friends who'd stopped calling years ago suddenly eager to reconnect now that she was no longer a Hayes. Acquaintances from the club offering hollow sympathy laced with barely concealed glee. Vivian turned off her phone. The packing took less time than she'd expected. 3 years of marriage fit into one duffel bag. Everything else, all the trappings of wealth and status, belonged to someone else. Always had. She zipped the bag closed and set it by the door. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the city. Chicago glittered below her, millions of lights, marking lives being lived, stories being written. Somewhere down there, people were falling in love, getting their hearts broken, making mistakes, and living with the consequences. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Tomorrow she'd be one of them again, just another person trying to figure out where she belonged. The door opened behind her. Vivian turned, expecting Beatrice with another cruel parting shot. But it was Preston's father, Richard Hayes. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Vivian nodded, too tired to argue. Richard closed the door behind him and walked to the window, standing beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "My wife can be harsh," he said finally. "Your wife got what she wanted," Vivian replied. "She usually does." Richard sighed. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You were good for Preston. You made him better." "Clearly not good enough." "That's not about you," Richard said. "My son is weak. He always has been. He doesn't stand up to his mother, doesn't make his own decisions, doesn't fight for what matters. That's my fault, I suppose. I raised him to be a businessman, not a man." Vivian said nothing. What was there to say? "I tried to convince Beatrice to give you a proper settlement," Richard continued, "but she was adamant, and Preston didn't fight her on it." "Of course he didn't." Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't much. $50,000. It's from my personal account, not the family money. Beatrice doesn't know about it, and I'd appreciate if it stayed that way." Vivian stared at the envelope. "I don't want your money." "Take it anyway," Richard said, pressing it into her hand. "Consider it a severance package for putting up with this family for 3 years. God knows you earned it." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Vivian, for what it's worth, I hope you find someone who deserves you. Preston never did." Then he was gone, and Vivian was alone again with an envelope full of money that felt like blood money. She opened it, counted the bills mechanically. $50,000. More than she'd had when she'd married Preston, less than she'd need to start over. She tucked the envelope into her duffel bag. The rest of the night passed in a blur. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, not sleeping, just waiting for morning. The penthouse was silent around her, but she could feel the judgment seeping through the walls. The staff knew. The doorman knew. Everyone knew. At 5 a.m, Vivian gave up on sleep. She took one last shower in the marble bathroom, dressed in her own clothes, the ones from before, and braided her hair simply. No makeup, no jewelry, no mask. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was familiar, someone she'd forgotten existed. Not Preston's wife, not a Hayes, just Vivian. She picked up her duffel bag and walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway, past the formal living room where she'd hosted countless dinner parties, past the kitchen where she'd learned to pretend she enjoyed caviar, past the home office where Preston had told her just last month that he loved her. The front door opened before she reached it. Beatrice stood there, dressed immaculately, despite the early hour, her smile sharp as a knife. "Eager to leave?" she asked. "I don't blame you. If I'd been exposed as a fraud, I'd want to slink away too." "I'm leaving because you told me to," Vivian said evenly. "What happens now is on you." "Threats," Beatrice laughed. "From you, please, you have nothing. You are nothing. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of and forget you were ever a Hayes." Vivian walked past her without another word. She took the elevator down to the lobby, where the doorman Carlos gave her a sympathetic look. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. It's just Vivian now," she replied. "Miss Vivian," he corrected gently. He held the door open for her. "Good luck." The morning air was cold, a harsh Chicago wind cutting through her jacket. Vivian stood on the sidewalk, her duffel bag at her feet, and realized she had nowhere to go. Her old apartment was long gone, rented to someone else. Her friends had moved on. She had Richard's money, but no plan, no direction, no future. She pulled out her phone and stared at it. The number was still there waiting. 3 years of silence stood between her and that call. 3 years of pride and stubbornness and mistakes. Her thumb hovered over the screen. "Miss, are you okay?" Carlos had followed her outside. "Do you need me to call you a cab?" Vivian looked at him, this kind man who'd seen her come and go for 3 years, who'd never judged her, who'd always treated her with respect, even when the Hayes family didn't. "No," she said quietly. "I'm going to make a call first." She pressed the number before she could change her mind. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when a familiar voice answered. "This had better be important," the voice growled. "It's 5 in the morning." "Grandfather," Vivian whispered. "It's me." Silence, then quietly. "Sienna." She closed her eyes. "Yes. Where are you?" "Chicago. Outside the Hayes building. I made a mistake. You were right about everything, and I'm sorry, and I have nowhere else to go." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know I don't deserve your help after what I did, but please, stop," her grandfather said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Give me the address. Don't move. I'll have someone there in 20 minutes. "Grandfather, We'll talk when you're home," he said. "Where you belong, where you should have been all along." The line went dead. Vivian stood there, phone in hand, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Not from sadness anymore, from relief, from the weight of 3 years finally lifting. Carlos offered her his handkerchief without a word. She took it gratefully. 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The driver, an older man in a perfectly tailored suit, got out and approached her. "Miss Blackwood?" he asked. Vivian blinked. She hadn't heard that name in 3 years. "Yes, I'm Thomas. Mr. Blackwood sent me. May I take your bag?" He loaded her duffel into the trunk with the same care someone else might handle Louis Vuitton luggage. Then he opened the rear door for her. The interior smelled of leather and money, subtle and confident, in a way the Hayes family's ostentatious displays never were. As the car pulled away from the curb, Vivian looked back at the building one last time. Preston was probably still asleep, dreaming of his future with Tiffany. Beatrice was probably planning the wedding already. Neither of them gave her a second thought. But as the Mercedes turned the corner and the building disappeared from view, Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt like herself again. Thomas glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "We'll be at the airport in 30 minutes, Miss Blackwood. Your grandfather is waiting." "Airport?" Vivian asked. "Yes, miss. The Gulfstream is ready. Mr. Blackwood wants you home immediately." The Gulfstream. Of course. The family jet she'd refused to use when she'd married Preston, too proud to accept help from the family she was turning her back on. The jet she'd heard about in whispers at society functions, spoken of with awe and envy by people who didn't know she'd walked away from access to it. "Is he angry?" Vivian asked quietly. Thomas's eyes met hers in the mirror, and she saw kindness there. "Mr. Blackwood is many things, Miss Blackwood, but angry at you, no. He never was." Vivian leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. Through the window, Chicago streamed past the city where she'd lost herself and found nothing worth keeping. In a few hours, she'd be home. Not the penthouse that was never really hers, but home. Real home. And then what? She'd have to face her family, explain herself, admit to 3 years of spectacular failure. She'd have to rebuild from nothing, figure out who she was without Preston, without the Hayes name, without the identity she'd tried so hard to inhabit. But as the car sped toward the airport, toward the Gulfstream, toward her grandfather, and the life she'd abandoned, Vivian felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not regret, not anymore. It felt almost like anticipation. The game, she realized, wasn't over. It was just beginning. The private terminal at Chicago Executive Airport was empty at 6 in the morning. Thomas guided Vivian through security with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. No lines, no questions. Just a nod from the guard and a door that opened into the pre-dawn darkness. The Gulfstream G700 sat on the tarmac like a sleeping beast, its white exterior gleaming under the floodlights. Vivian stopped walking. "Miss Blackwood." Thomas turned back to her. "Are you all right?" She wasn't all right. She was terrified. 3 years ago, she'd walked away from all of this convinced that love was worth more than legacy. Now she was crawling back with nothing to show for her rebellion except bruises and divorce papers. "He's going to be so disappointed in me," Vivian whispered. Thomas's expression softened. Your grandfather has been waiting 3 years for this phone call. Disappointment is the last thing on his mind. The jet's door opened stairs, extending like a welcome. Vivian forced her feet to move, climbing toward whatever came next. At the top, a flight attendant greeted her with a smile that didn't quite hide her curiosity. Miss Blackwood, welcome aboard. Mr. Blackwood is in the main cabin. Vivian stepped inside, and the difference between this and Preston's world hit her immediately. The Hayes family was all flash, all showing off. Gold fixtures, designer everything, wealth screaming from every surface. This was different. The Gulfstream's interior was elegant, understated, the kind of luxury that didn't need to announce itself. Cream, leather, dark wood space designed for comfort and function, not impression. Her grandfather sat in one of the forward seats, a tablet in his hands, reading glasses perched on his nose. At 78, Marcus Blackwood looked exactly as she remembered. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a face that had built empires and buried enemies. He looked up as she approached. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus set down his tablet, removed his glasses, and stood. Sienna. The name hit her like a physical thing. Not Vivian. Sienna. Who she'd been before she'd tried to become someone else. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry I was stupid and stubborn and you were right about everything and I... Come here, Marcus said quietly. Sienna crossed the cabin and her grandfather pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, 3 years of holding herself together, finally shattering. He held her while she sobbed, one hand stroking her hair, like she was 5 years old again, scared of thunder. Shh, he murmured. You're home now. That's all that matters. I wasted 3 years, Sienna choked out. 3 years with people who hated me, who used me, who... You learned, Marcus corrected gently. Expensive lesson, I'll grant you, but you learned who to trust and who to walk away from. That knowledge is worth more than the time it cost. He guided her to a seat, then settled across from her. The flight attendant appeared with tea, set it down without a word, and disappeared toward the cockpit. The engines hummed to life. Drink, Marcus said. Then tell me everything. Sienna wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Where did she even start? He cheated on me, she said finally. With Tiffany Sterling, the Merger King's daughter. Marcus's expression didn't change. When did it start? I don't know. Months, maybe. Beatrice knew. She probably encouraged it. Sienna took a shaky breath. She came into my room this morning and slapped me, grabbed my hair, told me I was contaminating the family. Marcus's jaw tightened, the only sign of his anger. And Preston watched, did nothing. Sienna's hands trembled around the cup. I kept thinking he'd stop her, that he'd defend me, that somewhere in there was the man I married. But he just stood there. Because there is no man there, Marcus said flatly. Preston Hayes is a puppet, always has been. His mother pulls the strings he dances. I told you this 3 years ago. I know, Sienna whispered. I didn't listen. No, you didn't. Marcus leaned back, studying her. You were 24 years old and in love, or what you thought was love. I couldn't stop you any more than I could stop the tide. So I waited. For me to fail. For you to learn. Marcus picked up his tablet again. The divorce is finalized. I signed the papers this morning. Prenup. Everything stays with the Hayes family. I get nothing. Marcus made a sound that might have been amusement. Of course you do. Beatrice Hayes wrote that prenup herself, I'd wager. Probably stayed up nights dreaming of the day she'd use it. He tapped something on his screen. What name did you sign? Vivian Hayes. Good. Marcus looked satisfied. Then Vivian Hayes gets nothing, but Sienna Blackwood. He smiled, and it wasn't kind. Sienna Blackwood gets everything. Sienna set down her teacup. What are you talking about? Drink your tea, Marcus said. We have a 6-hour flight, plenty of time to discuss the future, your real future. The jet lifted off Chicago, falling away beneath them. Sienna watched the city shrink through the window, everything she'd tried to build becoming smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. I don't understand, she said, turning back to her grandfather. What do you mean, everything? Marcus set his tablet aside. Let me ask you something, Sienna. In 3 years of marriage, did Preston ever ask about your family? She thought about it. He knew my parents died when I was young, that I was raised by relatives. Did he know which relatives? I told him my grandfather raised me. Did he know your grandfather's name? Sienna opened her mouth, then closed it. The realization hit like cold water. I never told him your name. He never asked. And Beatrice, did she investigate you before the wedding? She must have. She knew I'd worked as a waitress, that I had no money, that I was nobody. She knew Vivian Carter was nobody, Marcus corrected. A waitress from Indiana with dead parents and no prospects. She never connected you to the Blackwood family because you'd buried that connection, changed your name, worked low-wage jobs, lived in a studio apartment. You wanted to be normal, so you became invisible. Sienna remembered those years. After her parents' accident, after the funeral, after the inheritance and the lawyers and the suffocating expectations she'd run. She'd been 18 and desperate to be anyone other than Sienna Blackwood, heiress to a fortune she'd never asked for. So she'd become Vivian Carter, average girl, living an average life, free. I wanted to be someone people liked for me, she said quietly, not for the money. And you got your wish, Marcus said. Preston loved Vivian the waitress. Beatrice tolerated Vivian the gold digger. Neither of them had any idea who you really were. Does it matter now I'm divorced? I have nothing. Vivian has nothing. Vivian has nothing, Marcus agreed. But Sienna Blackwood owns 40% of Sterling Group. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. What? Sienna's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus picked up his tablet and pulled up a document, turning it so she could see. Stock certificates, purchase agreements, dates going back 5 years. I started acquiring Sterling Group shares when you were 19, quietly through shell companies and offshore accounts. By the time you married Preston, I owned controlling interest. The Sterling family thinks they're independent, but they're one board vote away from irrelevance. Sienna stared at the numbers. 40% controlling interest. Why? Insurance, Marcus said simply. You were always going to inherit the Blackwood holdings, but I wanted you to have leverage, real power before you took over. The Sterling Group was undervalued and ripe for acquisition. I pulled the trigger. Does Preston know? Does Tiffany? No one knows. The purchases were buried under 15 layers of corporate structure. As far as the world knows, Sterling Group is owned by a diverse group of international investors. But I control those investors, which means you control them. Sienna's mind raced. Preston had been trying to merge Hayes Industries with Sterling Group for 2 years. It was supposed to be his masterpiece, the deal that would finally get him out from under his father's shadow. Tiffany had been his key to making it happen, her father's approval the missing piece. The merger, she said slowly. Preston and Tiffany, it's not just an affair. It's a business arrangement, Marcus confirmed. Preston gets access to Sterling's distribution network. Tiffany gets to be Mrs. Hayes and absorb the Hayes family name and social standing. Everyone wins. He paused. Except the merger can't happen without approval from Sterling's majority shareholder. Which is you. Which is you now. Marcus smiled. I'm transferring the shares to you effective immediately. Congratulations, Sienna. You're the most powerful person in Chicago, and your ex-husband has no idea you exist. The flight attendant returned with breakfast, setting out fruit and pastries with practiced efficiency. Sienna ignored the food, her mind spinning through implications and possibilities. When do they announce the merger? She asked. Marcus checked his tablet. The Starlight Charity Gala 3 weeks from today. Preston plans to make it official with Tiffany on his arm, her father giving the blessing, the whole society circus watching. It's supposed to be his coronation. And if the merger doesn't happen, Hayes Industries is overleveraged, Marcus said bluntly. Richard Hayes bet everything on this deal. Without Sterling's backing, the company will face a liquidity crisis within 6 months. Stock price will crater, creditors will call in loans, and the Hayes empire will crumble. Sienna felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. You planned this. I prepared for multiple scenarios, Marcus corrected. If your marriage had worked, if Preston had been the man you hoped he was, the Sterling shares would have been a wedding gift. We'd have merged the families, properly built something real. But Preston showed his true colors, so now we go to Plan B, which is destroying him. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. destroying his mother, destroying everyone who thought they could mistreat a Blackwood and walk away clean. Sienna looked down at her hands. Just hours ago, these hands had signed divorce papers, had packed a duffel bag, had accepted defeat. Now they were being offered a weapon. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I just want to move on." "Then you're a better person than I am," Marcus said. "But moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting them win. Beatrice Hayes put her hands on you, Sienna. She brutalized you and threw you out like garbage." Preston watched and did nothing. "You think they'll stop there? You think they won't spread poison about you, ruin your name, make you a cautionary tale at every society function from here to New York? Let them," Sienna said. "I don't care what they think." "You should." Marcus leaned forward. "Because in 3 weeks, Beatrice Hayes will be at that gala telling everyone who'll listen that you were a gold digger who got what you deserved. Preston will be there with Tiffany, playing the victim who escaped a fortune hunter, and the world will believe them because the Hayes family controls the narrative." "So what do you want me to do?" "Control your own narrative," Marcus said. "Show up at that gala as Sienna Blackwood. Let them see who you really are. Let them understand the magnitude of their mistake. And then when Preston announces his merger, you exercise your majority shareholder rights and vote no." Sienna closed her eyes. She could see it playing out. Preston's face when he realized, Beatrice's shock, Tiffany's father's rage, the entire gala watching as the Golden Boy's dreams disintegrated in real time. It was cruel. It was perfect. It was terrifying. "I haven't been Sienna Blackwood in 3 years," she said. "I don't know if I remember how." "You never stopped being her," Marcus said gently. "You just pretended for a while. But Sienna Blackwood doesn't beg for scraps from the Hayes family. She doesn't sign away her power and slink off into the night. She walks into that gala like she owns it because she does. She looks Preston in the eye and shows him exactly what he threw away. And then what? After the gala, after the merger fails, after everything burns down, what happens to me?" Marcus smiled. "Then you take your place as head of the Blackwood family. We have holdings in 17 countries, Sienna. Real estate, technology, energy, finance. The Sterling Group is just one piece. I've been running things alone for too long. It's time you learned the business." "I'm not ready," Sienna protested. "I don't know anything about running a company. I was a waitress 3 years ago." "You were a waitress by choice, not necessity," Marcus corrected. "You have an MBA from Columbia. You graduated top of your class. You chose to work at that diner because you wanted to hide, not because you lacked options. Stop pretending you're less than you are." Sienna had forgotten about Columbia. She'd finished her degree at 22, then promptly ignored everything she'd learned in favor of pouring coffee and taking orders. It had felt like freedom at the time. Now it felt like cowardice. "What if I fail?" she asked quietly. "Then you fail," Marcus said, "and you learn from it and you try again. That's how power works, Sienna. It's not about never falling. It's about who you become after you get back up." The jet flew on through the morning sky, carrying her away from everything she'd known and towards something terrifying and new. Sienna ate mechanically, the food tasteless, her mind churning through scenarios and possibilities. "Tell me about the gala," she said finally. "Everything. Who will be there, what to expect, how to prepare." Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. "Now you're asking the right questions." They spent the next 3 hours going over details. The Starlight Charity Gala was Chicago's premier social event. 500 of the city's wealthiest and most influential people gathered to raise money for children's hospitals while really just showing off and making deals. The Hayes family always had a table, as did the Sterlings. The mayor would attend several senators, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. It was where reputations were made and destroyed. "The dress code is black tie," Marcus said, "but you won't wear black. You'll wear something that makes every head turn when you walk in. Something that screams power and money and untouchability." "I don't have anything like that." "You will." Marcus made a note on his tablet. "I'll have my people handle it. Wardrobe, jewelry, hair, everything. You'll look like exactly what you are, a woman who owns the room before she enters it." "How do I act? What do I say when I see them?" You say as little as possible, Marcus advised. Let your presence do the talking. When Preston sees you, he'll be in shock. Let him stammer and flail. When Beatrice approaches, and she will you look through her like she's furniture. Don't engage, don't argue, don't explain. You're above all that now. What about Tiffany? Marcus's expression turned calculating. Tiffany Sterling is an interesting case. She thinks she's won. She's got Preston, she's got the merger, she's got her fairy tale. But Tiffany's father is a practical man. When he learns you control Sterling Group, he'll drop Preston like a hot coal. The question is whether Tiffany will see it coming. You sound like you admire her, Sienna said. I respect intelligence, Marcus replied. Tiffany's not stupid. She saw an opportunity and took it. Can't fault her for that. But she didn't do her homework. She assumed Vivian Hayes was nobody. Fatal mistake. The jet began its descent. Sienna looked out the window and saw green hills, sprawling estates, a landscape she'd grown up in and abandoned. Home. Are you ready? Marcus asked. Sienna thought about the question. Was she ready to step back into the life she'd fled, to become Sienna Blackwood again, with all the weight and expectation that name carried, to face down Preston and Beatrice and everyone who'd dismissed her? No. She wasn't ready, but she was going to do it anyway. Yes, she said. The Blackwood estate spread across 300 acres of Virginia countryside. The main house was a colonial masterpiece, white columns and brick gardens that would make Versailles jealous. Sienna had spent her childhood here, running through these halls, hiding in these gardens, learning to ride in these stables. It looked exactly the same as the day she'd left. Thomas brought the car around the same Mercedes that had picked her up in Chicago. As they drove up the long driveway, Sienna saw staff assembled on the front steps. Housekeepers, groundskeepers, the estate manager, all of them waiting. They wanted to welcome you home, Marcus said. I hope you don't mind. Sienna's throat tightened. I don't deserve this. You're a Blackwood, Marcus said simply. This is your birthright. Stop apologizing for it. The car stopped and Thomas opened her door. Sienna stepped out and the staff applauded, genuine smiles on their faces. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, who'd bandaged Sienna's scraped knees and listened to her teenage heartbreaks, had tears in her eyes. Welcome home, Miss Sienna, Mrs. Chen said, pulling her into a hug. We've missed you terribly. I've missed you too, Sienna whispered. And she had. God, she had. The next few days blurred together. Sienna relearned the rhythms of the estate, settling back into routines she'd forgotten. Morning coffee in the sunroom, afternoon walks through the gardens, evening dinners with Marcus talking business and strategy. It felt like coming back to life after being underwater for 3 years. Marcus's team descended like a well-oiled machine. Stylists brought racks of gowns for the gala. Sienna tried on 15 before finding the one that made her feel like herself again. Deep emerald green fitted elegant without being ostentatious. It cost more than her first car, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw Sienna Blackwood staring back. The jeweler came next, carrying cases of pieces that made her dizzy. Marcus selected a diamond necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, simple and devastating. Blackwood women don't need to scream, he said. They whisper and the world listens. Lawyers arrived with documents to sign. The Sterling Group shares transferred into her name 40% of a multi-billion-dollar company now hers to control. She signed with steady hands, this time no trembling, no fear, just cold clarity. The publicity team came last. They needed to reintroduce Sienna Blackwood to society, but carefully, strategically. A few well-placed calls to the right journalists, hints dropped at the right parties. By the time the gala arrived, everyone would know her name. They just wouldn't know she was Vivian Hayes until she walked through the door. 1 week before the gala, Marcus called her into his study. We need to discuss the endgame, he said. Sienna settled into the leather chair across from his desk. I thought the endgame was blocking the merger. That's the opening move, Marcus corrected. The endgame is what comes after. When you vote down the merger, Preston will try to negotiate. He'll offer concessions, sweeteners, anything to change your mind. You need to be ready. I won't change my mind. I know. But he doesn't know that yet. He'll think he can charm you, manipulate you, make you see reason. He'll offer you money. I don't want his money. He'll offer you him, Marcus said quietly. He'll say he made a mistake. that he still loves you, that Tiffany meant nothing. He'll try to use your feelings against you. Sienna's hands tightened on the armrests. I won't fall for that. Are you sure? Marcus's gaze was penetrating. 3 weeks ago, you were signing divorce papers and crying over him. Can you honestly tell me you feel nothing? Could she? Sienna thought about Preston, about the man she'd loved, or thought she'd loved. The truth was more complicated. She'd loved the idea of him, the fantasy of being chosen by someone like him. But the reality? The reality was a weak man who let his mother abuse his wife. The reality was a cheater who blamed his victim. The reality was someone she didn't know at all. I feel sorry for him, Sienna said finally. Sorry that he's so small, but I don't love him. I don't think I ever really did. Marcus nodded slowly. Good. Because mercy gets you killed in business. If you hesitate, if you let emotion cloud your judgment, Preston will use it. Beatrice will use it. They'll find the crack and wedge it open until you break. I won't break, Sienna said. Not again. Then show me. Marcus slid a document across the desk. This is the merger agreement. Read it. Find the weaknesses. Tell me where to strike. Sienna picked up the document and began to read. The legal language was dense, but her Columbia education kicked in parsing clauses and conditions. She'd spent 3 years pretending she didn't understand business, playing the vapid wife at dinner parties. But the knowledge had always been there, dormant, waiting. 2 hours later, she looked up. The financing clause, she said. Section 12. Hayes Industries is leveraging their assets to fund the merger. If Sterling backs out, they're exposed. Exposed how? They've already borrowed against future revenue from the merged company. If the merger fails, the loans come due immediately. They don't have the liquidity to cover it. Marcus smiled. What else? The social capital, Sienna continued. Preston's staked his reputation on this deal. If it falls through, especially publicly, he's finished. No one will trust him with their investments. No one will partner with Hayes Industries. The company dies not from the debt, but from the perception. And Beatrice? Sienna thought about Preston's mother, about her cruelty and her pride. She'll blame Preston. She spent 30 years building him up as the heir, the future of the family. If he fails this spectacularly, she'll have to answer for it. Her friends, her social circle, they'll ask why she didn't see it coming, why she didn't protect the family. It'll destroy her credibility. Perfect, Marcus said. You understand the game. Now play it. The night before the gala, Sienna couldn't sleep. She stood in her bedroom, the emerald gown hanging in the closet, the diamond necklace gleaming on her dresser. Tomorrow, she'd walk back into Preston's world. Tomorrow, she'd show him who she really was. Tomorrow, everything changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you'll be at the gala. Can't wait to catch up. Tiffany. Sienna stared at the message. Tiffany knew. Somehow, despite all the precautions, Tiffany Sterling knew Sienna Blackwood would be there, which meant Preston probably knew too, which meant the element of surprise was gone. She forwarded the text to Marcus. His response came back immediately. Good. Let them sweat. Sienna set down her phone and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Vivian Hayes, passive and broken. She wasn't even the Sienna Blackwood who'd run away at 18. She was someone new, someone forged in humiliation and betrayal and 3 years of pretending to be less than she was. Tomorrow, the world would meet her, and the Hayes family would learn what it cost to make an enemy of a Blackwood. The Gulfstream touched down at Chicago Executive at 4 p.m, 3 hours before the gala. Sienna had barely slept on the flight, running through scenarios in her head, preparing for every possible reaction. Marcus sat across from her, reviewing final details on his tablet. The car will take us directly to the peninsula, he said. Hair and makeup are waiting. We'll arrive at the gala at 7:15, fashionably late, but not too late. Timing matters. Who else knows I'm coming? Sienna asked. My assistant leaked it to 3 key people yesterday. By now, half of Chicago society knows Sienna Blackwood will be there. The other half is about to find out. Marcus looked up from his screen. Your entrance will be the story of the night, until you make your real move. Sienna's phone buzzed again. Another text from Tiffany. Wear something memorable. Preston's excited to see you again. The casual cruelty of it made Sienna's jaw tighten. Tiffany thought this was a game she'd already won. She had no idea the board had been flipped. "She's baiting you," Marcus observed, watching Sienna's face. "She wants you emotional off balance. Don't give her the satisfaction." "I won't." Sienna deleted the text without responding. The Peninsula Hotel rose above Michigan Avenue like a monument to wealth. The suite Marcus had booked occupied the entire top-floor floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of the city that had chewed Sienna up and spit her out. She stood at the glass, looking down at the streets where she'd walked, as Vivian Hayes, invisible and powerless. "Miss Blackwood." A woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. "I'm Claire, your stylist. Shall we begin?" The transformation took 2 hours. Claire worked with the precision of a surgeon, every detail calculated. Hair swept up in a style that showed off Sienna's neck and collarbones, makeup that enhanced without overwhelming nails, painted a deep red that matched her lips. When Claire finally stepped back, Sienna barely recognized herself. "The dress," Claire said, and her assistant brought forward the emerald gown. Sienna had tried it on a dozen times at the estate, but wearing it here in Chicago felt different. The silk whispered against her skin as she stepped into it, the fabric hugging every curve. Claire zipped it up and adjusted the neckline, then draped the diamond necklace around Sienna's throat. The stones caught the light and threw it back cold fire. "Look," Claire said quietly, turning Sienna toward the mirror. The woman in the reflection was a stranger. Powerful, elegant, untouchable. Not Vivian Hayes, the discarded wife. Not even Sienna Blackwood, the runaway heiress. Someone new. Someone who could walk into that gala and make Preston Hayes remember her name for the rest of his miserable life. "Perfect," Marcus said from the doorway. He'd changed into his tuxedo, looking every inch the patriarch he was. "Are you ready?" Sienna took a breath. "Yes." The car ride to the Four Seasons Hotel, where the gala was being held, took 15 minutes. Sienna spent them in silence, centering herself, preparing. Marcus made a phone call, speaking in low tones to someone about stock positions and market timing. Business never stopped, not in his world, not in her world anymore. They pulled up to the entrance at exactly 7:15. A red carpet stretched from the curb to the hotel doors, lined with photographers and reporters. Other guests were arriving in their own black cars, and limousines, couples in designer gowns and tuxedos, the wealthy and powerful of Chicago, gathering for their annual ritual. "Remember," Marcus said as Thomas opened the door, "you're not here for them. You're here for you. Everything else is just noise." Sienna stepped out of the car and the cameras exploded. Flashes went off like lightning voices shouting questions she couldn't distinguish. She kept her face serene, one hand holding her clutch, the other accepting Marcus's offered arm. They walked up the carpet together, grandfather and granddaughter, the Blackwood family, making their statement. "Miss Blackwood over here." "Mr. Blackwood, is this your granddaughter?" "Sienna, who are you wearing?" She ignored them all, keeping her eyes forward. The hotel doors opened and they stepped into the lobby, leaving the chaos behind. The ballroom entrance was ahead, marked by another check-in table and more security. A woman in a headset glanced at them, then did a double-take. "Mr. Blackwood, we weren't expecting you until later. Your table is ready, of course?" Her eyes flickered to Sienna. "And this is my granddaughter, Sienna Blackwood," Marcus said smoothly. "She'll be joining me." The woman's professional smile faltered for just a second. She'd heard the rumors then. She knew who Sienna was. "Of course, right this way." They walked into the ballroom, and conversation died in ripples spreading outward from their entrance like a stone thrown into still water. Sienna felt the weight of 500 stares, heard the whispers starting, saw heads turning. Marcus guided her toward their table near the front, close to the stage where the speeches would happen, close to where everyone could see. "There's Preston," Marcus murmured. 10 o'clock. Don't look yet." Sienna forced herself to focus on reaching the table, greeting the other guests already seated. A tech CEO and his wife, a federal judge, a philanthropist whose family money went back to railroads. They all stood as Marcus made introductions, their eyes curious and assessing. "Sienna's been living abroad," Marcus said, easily establishing the cover story. "She's home now, permanently." "How wonderful," the philanthropist said. "You must tell us all about Europe. I'm sure it's fascinating." Sienna smiled and said something appropriate, playing the role while her heart hammered. She could feel Preston's stare like a physical thing burning into her back. Not yet. Not yet. A waiter brought champagne. Sienna took a glass she had no intention of drinking. She needed her head clear, her reflexes sharp. Around them, the ballroom filled as more guests arrived, the noise level rising, the energy building. This was Chicago's elite at play, schmoozing and networking under the guise of charity. "Sienna!" The voice came from behind her. Male shocked, disbelieving. She turned slowly, letting the moment stretch, and looked into Preston Hayes' face. He'd aged in 3 weeks, stress lines around his eyes, his jaw tight, his skin pale under his tan. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost $5,000 and looked like he was being strangled by his bow tie. Next to him, Tiffany Sterling watched with barely concealed glee, her blonde hair perfect, her silver gown shimmering. "Preston," Sienna said calmly. "Hello. What are you—" He stopped, glancing at Marcus at the table, trying to piece it together. "I don't understand. What are you doing here?" "Attending a charity gala," Sienna replied. "Same as you." "But you—" Preston's voice dropped. "You can't be here. This is a private event." "I'm aware." Sienna took a sip of champagne she didn't taste. "My grandfather secured our invitation months ago. We wouldn't miss it." "Your grandfather?" Preston looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and something clicked. His face went from pale to gray. "Marcus Blackwood. You're Marcus Blackwood." "Guilty," Marcus said pleasantly. "And you must be Preston Hayes. I've heard so much about you." Tiffany stepped forward, her smile sharp. "This is cozy. Vivian, I didn't know you had connections. You kept that quiet." "It's Sienna, actually," Sienna corrected. "Vivian was a nickname, a phase. I'm over it now." "Sienna Blackwood," Tiffany repeated, and her smile flickered. She knew the name. Everyone in business knew the name. "You're that Blackwood. I'm a Blackwood, yes." Preston grabbed Sienna's arm, his fingers digging in. "We need to talk, now." Marcus's hand moved, catching Preston's wrist with surprising strength. "Remove your hand from my granddaughter, or I'll have security remove you from this building." Preston let go like he'd been burned. "Sienna, please. Just 5 minutes. Alone." "I don't think so," Sienna said. "We said everything that needed saying 3 weeks ago, when you watched your mother assault me and did nothing." "That's not—" Preston glanced around, aware of eyes watching, ears listening. "Can we please not do this here?" "Do what?" Sienna asked innocently. "I'm just attending a gala with my grandfather. You're the one making a scene." Tiffany's hand landed on Preston's shoulder, possessive and warning. "Darling, our table is waiting. We should sit down before the speeches start." "In a moment," Preston said, shaking her off. His eyes locked on Sienna's. "Why are you here? Really?" "To support children's hospitals," Sienna said, "and to enjoy an evening out. Why else would anyone be here?" "You're lying." Preston's voice was low, urgent. "You're planning something. I can see it in your face." "You couldn't see anything in my face for 3 years," Sienna replied. "Why start now?" The barb hit home. Preston flinched. "I made a mistake. I know that now. My mother, she pushed me, and I should have stood up to her. I should have protected you." "Yes," Sienna agreed. "You should have. But you didn't." "I want to fix this," Preston said. "Can we talk tomorrow? After the gala, I'll take you to lunch. We can discuss everything. Figure out." "There's nothing to figure out," Sienna interrupted. "We're divorced, Preston. You got what you wanted. Tiffany got what she wanted. Everyone's happy." "I'm not happy," Preston said, and he sounded desperate. "I haven't been happy since you left. I was wrong, Sienna, about everything. Give me a chance to make it right." Tiffany's face had gone from amused to angry. "Preston, what are you doing?" "Not now, Tiffany." "Yes, now." Tiffany's voice rose. "We have an announcement tonight. Remember the merger your future? Or are you really going to throw that away for your ex-wife?" The word ex-wife hung in the air like a slap. Preston turned red. "Tiffany, I said not now." "Fascinating," Marcus murmured. "Young love." Preston ignored him, his attention fixed on Sienna. "Please, just one conversation. That's all I'm asking." Sienna looked at him. Really looked at him. 3 weeks ago, this man had broken her heart. She'd loved him, or thought she did. She'd built her world around him, changed herself for him, given up everything for him. And he'd discarded her like trash. Now he wanted her back. Not because he loved her. Not because he'd realized what he'd lost. But because seeing her here dressed like this, connected to the Blackwood family, had changed the equation. She wasn't worthless Vivian anymore. She was valuable Sienna, and Preston Hayes' creature of ambition, that he was wanted a piece of that value. No, Sienna said simply. Sienna? I said no. She turned back to her table, dismissing him. Enjoy your evening, Preston. I know I will. She could feel his shock, his frustration, his impotent rage. Tiffany grabbed his arm and hauled him away, hissing something Sienna couldn't hear. Good. Let them fight. Let them tear each other apart. Marcus waited until they were out of earshot. Well handled. He's rattled. He's scared, Sienna corrected. He knows something's wrong, but he can't figure out what. He will soon enough. Marcus checked his watch. Speeches start in 20 minutes. The merger announcement is scheduled right before dinner. That's when you make your move. Sienna's hands were shaking. She set down her champagne glass before anyone could notice. What if I freeze? What if I can't do it? You won't freeze, Marcus said with absolute certainty. You're a Blackwood. We don't freeze. The next 20 minutes crawled by. Sienna made small talk with the other guests at the table, smiled and nodded, and pretended everything was fine while her heart tried to climb out of her chest. Across the ballroom, she could see Preston and Tiffany at their table, surrounded by the Hayes family. Beatrice sat like a queen, her face smug, her diamonds catching the light. Richard looked tired, older than his years. Preston kept glancing over at Sienna, his expression unreadable. Finally, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, and the evening's MC, some local news anchor, walked to the podium. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 25th Annual Starlight Charity Gala. Applause filled the ballroom. The anchor launched into the usual speech about children's hospitals and community support and the importance of giving back. Sienna stopped listening, her focus narrowing to what came next. And now, the anchor said, we have a special announcement. Please welcome Preston Hayes and Tiffany Sterling. More applause, louder this time. Preston and Tiffany walked to the stage hand in hand, both of them glowing under the spotlight. They looked perfect together, golden and polished and powerful. The fairy tale couple. Thank you all for being here tonight. Preston began, his voice smooth and confident. Tiffany and I are thrilled to announce that Hayes Industries and Sterling Group have reached an agreement to merge our companies. The ballroom erupted. This was the news everyone had been waiting for, the deal that would reshape Chicago's business landscape. Preston soaked in the attention, his smile wide. This merger represents the future, he continued. Two great families coming together, combining our resources and expertise to build something unprecedented. Sterling's global distribution network, paired with Hayes Industries' manufacturing capabilities, will create a powerhouse that... Point of order, Marcus said, his voice cutting through Preston's speech like a knife. The spotlight swung toward their table. Preston squinted against the glare, confused. Excuse me. Marcus stood slowly, every eye in the ballroom fixed on him. I said point of order. You're announcing a merger that hasn't been approved by Sterling Group's board of directors. That seems premature. Tiffany leaned into the microphone. The board approved this merger 2 weeks ago, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps you're not as informed as you think. The board approved it conditionally, Marcus corrected, pending approval from the majority shareholder, which they don't have. Tiffany's father stood from his table. Marcus, what are you playing at? The majority shareholders are right here. My family controls Sterling Group. Your family controls 35%, Marcus said. The rest is distributed among various investment groups, or so you thought. The room had gone dead silent. Preston and Tiffany stood frozen on stage the moment they'd planned for slipping away from them like sand. What are you saying? Tiffany's father demanded. Marcus smiled. I'm saying that those investment groups, they're mine. Held through shell companies and offshore accounts acquired over the past 5 years. I own 40% of Sterling Group, which makes me the majority shareholder, and I haven't approved any merger. The ballroom exploded, voices shouting, people standing, chaos spreading. On stage, Tiffany had gone white. Her father looked like he might have a stroke. Preston just stared at Marcus with the expression of a man watching his world collapse. "You can't do this," Tiffany's father said. "We had a deal. The contracts are signed." "The contracts specify board approval, which requires majority shareholder consent," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm denying that consent. The merger is dead." Preston found his voice. Why would you do this?" Marcus looked at Sienna. Everyone looked at Sienna. The spotlight found her, illuminating her at the table, the emerald gown shimmering the diamonds at her throat, glittering like ice. "Because," Marcus said, "the shares don't belong to me anymore. I transferred them to my granddaughter yesterday. Sienna Blackwood is the majority shareholder of Sterling Group, and she's the one who voted no." The silence that followed was absolute. 500 people holding their breath, waiting. Sienna stood slowly, letting them see her, letting them understand. She walked toward the stage, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the sound impossibly loud. She climbed the steps and took the microphone from Preston's nerveless hand. He stood there paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. "Hello," Sienna said, her voice steady and clear. "For those who don't know me, I'm Sienna Blackwood. Some of you knew me as Vivian Hayes. Yes, that Vivian Hayes, Preston's ex-wife." The room erupted again, but Sienna kept talking, her voice cutting through the noise. "3 weeks ago, I signed divorce papers and walked away from the Hayes family with nothing. No money, no assets, nothing. Beatrice Hayes made sure of that. She wanted me gone, and she got her wish. What she didn't know is who I really was, what I really owned, what I really had the power to do." Sienna turned to Preston, looking him in the eye. "You threw me away because you thought I was worthless," she said. "Your mother brutalized me because she thought I was powerless. You both made a mistake, because I'm not Vivian Hayes, the waitress who got lucky. I'm Sienna Blackwood, and I own the company you need to survive." Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "The merger is dead," Sienna continued. "Sterling Group will not be partnering with Hayes Industries. Not now, not ever. And without this deal, your company is finished. You're over-leveraged, overextended, and out of options. Within 6 months, Hayes Industries will collapse. Your family's legacy will be destroyed, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself." Beatrice Hayes surged to her feet at her table. "You vindictive little—" "Careful," Sienna interrupted. "I'm not the one who put hands on anyone. I'm not the one who committed assault. Keep talking, and I'll have my lawyers file charges. I have witnesses, I have bruises, and I have nothing to lose." Beatrice's mouth snapped shut. Sienna looked out at the ballroom, at the sea of shocked faces, at Chicago's elite watching their carefully ordered world crack apart. "I came here tonight to show you who I really am," she said. "Not Preston's ex-wife, not the gold digger Beatrice Hayes told everyone I was. I'm Sienna Blackwood, and if anyone else wants to underestimate me, go ahead. But remember what happened to the people who already tried." She set down the microphone and walked off the stage. Marcus was waiting at the bottom of the steps, his expression proud. He offered his arm, and they walked together through the silent ballroom toward the exit, leaving behind the wreckage of Preston's dreams. Behind them, the chaos exploded. Voices shouting accusations, flying, the Hayes family imploding. Sienna didn't look back. She didn't need to. She'd said what needed saying. She'd done what needed doing. The rest was just aftermath. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Thomas had the car waiting. Marcus handed Sienna into the back seat, then settled beside her. "How do you feel?" he asked. Sienna thought about it. She'd just destroyed Preston's future, humiliated him in front of everyone who mattered, crushed his dreams like he'd crushed hers. She should feel guilty. She should feel something other than this cold satisfaction. "I feel free," she said. Marcus smiled. "Good, because we're just getting started." The car pulled away from the Four Seasons, leaving the gala behind. Sienna looked out the window at Chicago, passing by the city where she'd lost herself and found something better. Somewhere in that hotel, Preston was realizing the full extent of what he'd lost. Beatrice was scrambling to contain the damage. Tiffany was probably running for the exits, her fairy tale shattered. Sienna's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." She showed it to Marcus. He read it, then shrugged. "Empty threats from desperate people. Ignore it." But Sienna didn't delete it. She saved it along with Tiffany's earlier texts. Evidence if it came to that. Because this wasn't over. Preston wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. Beatrice wouldn't let her precious family go down without a fight. There would be retaliation, legal battles, social warfare. But Sienna was ready. For the first time in 3 years, she was ready for anything. "Where to now?" she asked Marcus. "Home," he said. "Back to Virginia. We have work to do, companies to run, empires to build. You wanted to know who you are without Preston Hayes. Now you get to find out." The car merged onto the highway, heading toward the airport, toward the Gulf Stream, toward home. Sienna leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new challenges, new enemies. But tonight, she'd won. She'd walked into that ballroom as Vivian Hayes, the discarded wife, and walked out as Sienna Blackwood, the woman who owned the board, and that she thought was just the beginning. The Gulf Stream lifted off at 11 that night, climbing through Chicago's sky and leaving the wreckage below. Sienna sat in silence, her phone buzzing every few seconds with texts, calls, voicemails. The news was spreading like wildfire. Chicago's social media was exploding with videos from the gala, speculation running wild, her name trending alongside Preston's and the Hayes family. Marcus scrolled through his tablet, monitoring the fallout. Hayes Industries stock is down 18% in after-hours trading. Sterling Group is up 12%. The market's already pricing in the merger failure. Sienna stared out the window at the darkness. How long before they recover? Hayes Industries. They won't. Marcus looked up. Preston leveraged everything on this deal. The loans come due in 90 days. Without Sterling's backing, the banks will panic. They'll call in the debt, liquidate assets, tear the company apart piece by piece. And the Sterling family, they'll be fine. Tiffany's father is furious, but he'll adapt. He's a survivor. Marcus paused. Unlike Preston. Sienna's phone rang again. Preston's name flashed on the screen the 15th time he'd called in an hour. She declined it, but this time he didn't hang up. A voicemail notification appeared immediately. Against her better judgment, she played it on speaker. Preston's voice filled the cabin, raw and desperate. "Sienna, please. Please pick up. I know you're angry. I know you hate me, but this isn't just about me. My father. The employees' 3,000 families depend on Hayes Industries. You're going to destroy all of them because of what I did. That's not you. That's not the woman I married. Call me back, please." The message ended. Sienna's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. "He's trying to guilt you," Marcus said quietly. "Making it about innocent people instead of his own failures. Classic manipulation." 3,000 employees, Sienna whispered. "That's real. Those are real people with real families. And whose fault is that?" Marcus's voice turned hard. "Who over-leveraged the company? Who gambled everything on a merger he hadn't secured? Who treated his wife like garbage and thought there'd be no consequences? Preston Hayes did this to those families, not you." "But I have the power to stop it." "You have the power to reward failure," Marcus corrected. "To tell Preston that he can treat people however he wants, because someone will always bail him out. Is that the lesson you want to teach him?" Sienna closed her eyes. He was right. She knew he was right. But the weight of 3,000 jobs felt like a stone on her chest. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Richard Hayes, Preston's father. "Miss Blackwood, please, I'm begging you. Reconsider the merger. Name your price. Whatever you want, it's yours. Just don't let the company die. Richard." "Now the father's trying," Marcus observed. "They're pulling out all the stops." Sienna read the message again. Richard had been kind to her, giving her that envelope of money when she had nothing. He'd apologized for his family's cruelty. He didn't deserve to lose everything. But he'd also raised Preston. He'd enabled Beatrice for 30 years. He'd built a company on a foundation of arrogance and entitlement, and now that foundation was crumbling. "What would you do?" Sienna asked Marcus. "I'd watch it burn," he said without hesitation. "But I'm not you. You have to decide what kind of leader you want to be, merciful or effective. You rarely get to be both." The flight attendant brought dinner, but Sienna couldn't eat. Her stomach was twisted in knots, her mind racing through scenarios and consequences. If she let Hayes Industries collapse, 3,000 people lost their jobs. If she saved it, Preston learned nothing. There had to be a third option, something she wasn't seeing. "What if I bought the company?" she said suddenly. Marcus set down his fork. "Explain." "Hayes Industries is about to be liquidated, right? Assets sold off to pay creditors. What if I'm the one who buys those assets? I restructure the company under new management, keep the employees, but the Hayes family loses control entirely. You'd be saving Preston's legacy while destroying his power, Marcus said slowly. Interesting. The employees keep their jobs, but the Hayes name means nothing. Everything they built becomes yours. Not mine, ours. Sienna leaned forward. Blackwood Holdings acquires Hayes Industries, absorbs it completely. We gut the leadership, fire anyone connected to the family, rebuild from the ground up. Preston loses everything, but the workers don't. Marcus smiled, cold and calculating. That's crueler than letting it die. Preston would have to watch his family company operate under the Blackwood name. Every success would be ours, every failure his responsibility. He'd spend the rest of his life knowing he handed his legacy to his ex-wife. Can we do it legally? Once the banks call the loans, the company goes into receivership. We'd bid at auction like anyone else. Marcus pulled up files on his tablet. The assets are worth about $800 million. After debt, probably $400. We could structure the purchase through Sterling Group, make it a business decision rather than personal revenge. How long do we have? 90 days until the loans mature, maybe 60 before the banks lose patience and force liquidation. Marcus looked at her carefully. This is a massive commitment, Sienna. You'd be taking on a failing company, thousands of employees, decades of mismanagement. Are you ready for that? Was she? Sienna thought about the weight of it, the responsibility. She'd spent 3 years playing housewife, and now she was contemplating a corporate takeover that would reshape Chicago's business landscape. It was insane. It was perfect. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Then we start planning tomorrow. Tonight you rest. You've earned it. But rest didn't come. Sienna lay in the Jet's bedroom staring at the ceiling while her phone continued its relentless buzzing. Messages from people she'd never heard of, reporters requesting interviews, lawyers offering their services. The whole world wanted a piece of her story. One text stood out from the noise. Tiffany Sterling. You think you won? You just declared war on 2 of Chicago's most powerful families. We will destroy you. Sienna stared at the message, then typed a response. You already tried that. How'd it work out? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Petty maybe, but satisfying. Tiffany's response came immediately. This isn't over. It is for you, Sienna wrote back. Preston's broke. Your father's furious. The merger's dead. Walk away while you still can. I don't walk away. Then you'll fall. Your choice. Sienna turned off her phone after that. Whatever came next could wait until morning. The estate looked different when they landed at dawn. Sienna had left it 3 weeks ago as a refuge, a place to hide and heal. Now it felt like headquarters, a war room from which she'd launch her counterattack. The staff greeted them at the door, Mrs. Chen taking one look at Sienna's face and immediately ordering breakfast. You need food and sleep in that order, Mrs. Chen said firmly. Whatever's happening can wait 2 hours. I don't have 2 hours, Sienna protested. You do, Marcus said. Mrs. Chen is right. You're running on adrenaline and spite. That won't sustain you. Eat shower rest. The Empire Building starts at 10. Sienna wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her with a massive yawn. Fine, 2 hours. She could give herself that much. She woke 4 hours later to someone knocking on her door. Disoriented, she checked her phone. 2 in the afternoon. She'd slept through her alarm, through multiple calls from Marcus, through what sounded like controlled chaos downstairs. Come in, she called. Mrs. Chen entered with a tray. Your grandfather said to let you sleep. You needed it more than whatever meetings he had scheduled. What meetings? The lawyers arrived at 9, the accountants at 10, some very serious men in suits at 11. Mrs. Chen set down the tray. Eat first, then you can join them. Sienna forced down the food, showered quickly, and dressed in a simple black suit. Professional, authoritative, ready for war. She found Marcus in his study, surrounded by papers, and 3 men in expensive suits. Sienna, Marcus said, looking up. Good, you're awake. These are our attorneys. Mitchell handles corporate law. Chen does mergers and acquisitions. And Robert specializes in hostile takeovers. Hostile takeovers, Sienna repeated. Robert smiled thinly. Your grandfather suggested we might need my expertise. "We've been reviewing Hayes Industries' financials," Mitchell said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The situation is worse than we thought. Preston didn't just bet on the Sterling merger, he borrowed against it, took out loans using the future merged company as collateral. When the merger died, those loans became immediately callable." "How much?" Sienna asked. $380 million due in full within 30 days. Sienna sat down heavily. 30 days? You said 90. "I was wrong," Marcus admitted. "Preston was more desperate than I realized. He needed cash flow now, so he took out short-term bridge loans, predatory interest rates, suicide terms. He was planning to refinance everything once the merger completed. Without that merger, the whole house of cards collapses in a month." "Can he raise the money anywhere else?" Chen shook his head. "We've checked every possible source. The banks won't touch him. Private equity won't touch him. His reputation is destroyed after last night. No one wants to catch a falling knife." "What about his father's personal wealth?" "Richard Hayes is worth maybe $100 million mostly in Hayes Industries stock," Roberts said. "If the company fails, that stock becomes worthless. He'd lose everything trying to save nothing." Sienna felt an unwelcome stab of sympathy. Richard didn't deserve this. But his son had built the trap, and now everyone was caught in it. "What are our options?" she asked. "We wait for the company to fail, then buy the assets at bankruptcy prices," Mitchell said. "Cleanest solution. Hayes Industries ceases to exist. Blackwood Holdings acquires the valuable pieces, everyone moves on." "Except 3,000 employees," Sienna said. The lawyers exchanged glances. "That's not your problem," Roberts said carefully. "Those employees work for Preston Hayes. His mismanagement isn't your responsibility. But I have the power to help them." "You have the power to save Preston," Marcus corrected, "which sends the message that you're soft, that your threats are empty, that people can abuse you without consequences." "Is that the message you want to send?" Sienna stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate grounds. Somewhere in Chicago, Preston was scrambling to save his company. Beatrice was probably calling in every favor she had. Richard was watching his life's work disintegrate, and 3,000 employees were updating their resumes, terrified of the future. She'd wanted revenge. She'd gotten it. Preston's dreams were ashes. His reputation destroyed, his future bleak. Mission accomplished. So why did she feel hollow? "There's another option," Chen said quietly. "A third way if you're interested." Everyone turned to look at him. Chen pulled out a different folder, this one marked with red tabs. "We make Preston an offer. He sells Hayes Industries to Blackwood Holdings for $1. Symbolic price, total transfer of ownership. In exchange, we assume all the debt, keep the employees, and restructure the company under our control. The Hayes family loses everything, but the company survives." "He'd never agree to that," Roberts said. "His pride wouldn't allow it." "His pride doesn't get a vote," Chen replied. "It's this or bankruptcy. At least with our deal, Hayes Industries continues to exist. The name stays, the legacy stays, even if the family doesn't." Marcus looked at Sienna. "Is this what you want to save his company?" "I want to save the employees," Sienna said. "Preston's company is just the vehicle. If we can keep those people employed while still taking everything from him, that's the right move." "It's the merciful move," Marcus said. "Not sure it's the right one." "Then I'll be merciful," Sienna said firmly. "Draw up the offer, $1 for complete ownership. We assume the debt fire all Hayes family members from positions of power and rebuild under the Blackwood name. Take it or leave it." Chen nodded, making notes. "I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow." "One more thing," Sienna added. "Find out which employees are struggling most. Single parents, people with medical debt, anyone living paycheck to paycheck. When we take over, I want retention bonuses and emergency funds available. If we're doing this, we do it right." The lawyers looked surprised, but they nodded. Marcus's expression was unreadable. After they left, Sienna and her grandfather sat in silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. "You're not me," he said. "That's becoming clear." "Is that a bad thing?" "It's different. I built this empire by being ruthless. You're trying to build something else, something kinder." He paused. "I'm not sure the business world will let you." "Then I'll change the business world," Sienna said, "or die trying." Marcus laughed, a real laugh that softened his face. "You might actually pull it off. You're more stubborn than I ever was." "I learned from the best." Her phone rang. An unknown Chicago number. She answered cautiously. "Miss Blackwood, A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "This is Elizabeth Warren. I'm calling on behalf of the Chicago Business Council. We'd like to invite you to speak at our monthly meeting next week. Your actions at the gala have generated significant interest, and our members would appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from you about your business philosophy and future plans." Sienna covered the phone. "The Business Council wants me to speak," she whispered to Marcus. He raised his eyebrows. "That's the old guard. Every major CEO in Chicago. They're either courting you or sizing you up for destruction. Which do you think? Does it matter? Either way, you show up and make them respect you." Sienna uncovered the phone. "I'd be honored. When and where?" They set the details, and Sienna hung up feeling dizzy. A week ago, she'd been signing divorce papers. Now she was speaking to Chicago's business elite. The whiplash was nauseating. More calls followed. A venture capital firm wanted to discuss investment opportunities. A tech startup asked her to join their board. 3 different headhunters offered to find her executive positions. Everyone wanted proximity to the Blackwood name, to the power she represented. She declined them all politely. She had enough on her plate without adding more complications. That evening, Marcus called her to dinner in the formal dining room. The table was set for 4, which was strange. They ate together most nights, just the 2 of them, using the smaller breakfast room. "Are we expecting company?" Sienna asked. "Yes, someone you need to meet." Before she could ask who, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Chen went to answer it and returned with a woman in her 50s, gray hair and a neat bun, sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. "Sienna, this is Margaret Keating," Marcus said. "She was my chief operating officer for 20 years before she retired. I've asked her to come out of retirement to help you." Margaret extended her hand. "Miss Blackwood, your grandfather speaks very highly of you." "Likewise," Sienna said, shaking hands. Margaret's grip was firm, no nonsense. "Though I'm not sure I need—" "You do," Marcus interrupted. "You're about to take over a failing company, restructure it from the ground up, and run it alongside your existing responsibilities. You can't do that alone. Margaret knows more about corporate turnarounds than anyone alive. She's also ruthless, brilliant, and completely loyal. You need her." Margaret smiled slightly. "He's not wrong about most of that. The brilliant part might be overselling it." They sat down to dinner, and Margaret laid out her credentials. She'd salvaged 6 companies from bankruptcy, turned around 2 more from near-death experiences, and built Marcus's empire from a regional player to a global force. She'd retired at 55 to teach at Wharton, but one call from Marcus had brought her back. "I've reviewed Hayes Industries' financials," Margaret said, pulling documents from her briefcase. "The company is salvageable, but barely. You'll need to cut at least 30% of operating costs, renegotiate every major contract, and fire half the executive team. They're dead weight." "What about the employees?" Sienna asked. "The regular workers?" "Most of them are good people trapped in a bad system," Margaret said. "Keep them. Retrain them. Give them leadership that actually knows what it's doing. You'll have a functional company within 18 months. And if Preston doesn't accept our offer," Margaret's smile turned sharp, "then we wait for bankruptcy court and buy everything for pennies on the dollar. Either way, you win. The only question is how much Preston suffers in the process." Sienna pushed food around her plate. "I don't want him to suffer. I just want him to understand what he did." "Then you're kinder than me," Margaret said. "I'd want him on his knees." "I was on my knees 3 weeks ago," Sienna said quietly. "I know what it feels like. I wouldn't wish it on anyone." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "You're going to have trouble in this world. People will see that kindness as weakness. They'll try to exploit it." "Let them try," Sienna said. "I'm done being underestimated." "Good." Margaret raised her wine glass. "Then let's get to work." They spent the next 3 hours going over strategy. Margaret painted a clear picture of what taking over Hayes Industries would require. 60-hour weeks minimum, constant crisis management, pushback from entrenched interests, legal battles with creditors, resistance from employees loyal to the Hayes family. It would be brutal, exhausting, and all-consuming. "Can you handle that?" Margaret asked bluntly. "Because if you can't tell me now, I'm too old to waste time on people who aren't serious." Sienna met her eyes. 3 weeks ago, I was beaten by my mother-in-law while my husband watched. I signed away everything I thought I had and walked out with nothing. I called my grandfather from the street at 5 in the morning because I had nowhere else to go. I was at rock bottom. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Then I got up, Sienna continued. I flew home. I learned who I really was. I walked into a gala full of people who'd written me off, and I took back my power. I destroyed my ex-husband's dreams in front of 500 witnesses, and now I'm going to rebuild his company better than he ever could. So yes, Margaret, I can handle 60-hour weeks. I can handle crisis management. I can handle all of it, because I've already survived the worst thing that could happen to me. Everything else is just business. Margaret smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her stern exterior. Marcus said you had steel in you. He wasn't wrong. All right, Miss Blackwood, you've got yourself a COO. Let's go burn down some bridges and build an empire. They shook hands across the table, sealing the partnership. Marcus watched with satisfaction, his plan coming together exactly as he'd designed. After Margaret left, Sienna stood on the terrace looking up at the stars. Her phone buzzed one last time that day. A message from Preston sent at midnight. I got your offer. $1. You really hate me that much. Sienna typed her response carefully. This isn't about hate. It's about consequences. You built a company on arrogance and entitlement. I'm offering you a chance to save it by giving up control. Take the deal or lose everything. You have 24 hours to decide. She hit send and turned off her phone. Whatever Preston chose, she'd be ready. She had Marcus's wisdom, Margaret's experience, and her own hard-earned strength. The Hayes family had thrown her away like garbage. Now she was going to show them what garbage could become when it refused to stay down. 23 hours and 47 minutes after Sienna sent her ultimatum, Preston's response came through. Not a text this time. A phone call at 6 in the morning while Sienna was halfway through her second cup of coffee in Marcus's study, reviewing acquisition documents with Margaret. It's him, Sienna said, looking at her screen. Answer it, Marcus said from across the desk. Put it on speaker. I want to hear this. Sienna pressed accept. Preston, I'll take your deal. His voice was hollow, scraped raw. $1, complete transfer, everything. Just promise me the employees keep their jobs. That was always the plan, Sienna said. The workers aren't the ones who failed here. I know. A pause. I know what I did, Sienna. To you, to the company, to everyone. I know. Do you... Sienna's voice hardened. Because knowing and understanding are different things. You watched your mother put her hands on me. You cheated with Tiffany. You threw me out with nothing and never looked back. Those aren't mistakes, Preston. That's who you are. I was weak. Preston's voice cracked. I've always been weak. My mother controlled me, the business controlled me, expectations controlled me. I never learned how to be my own person. But that doesn't excuse what I did to you. Nothing excuses that. Margaret raised her eyebrows. Marcus's expression remained neutral, waiting. You could have learned, Sienna said. I gave you 3 years. I stood by you through everything. I changed myself for you. And the moment your mother decided I wasn't good enough, you agreed with her. You didn't even fight. I should have fought. Preston sounded like he was crying now. I should have protected you. I should have been the man you deserved. I wasn't. And now I'm losing everything because of it. The company, my reputation, my future. All of it gone because I was too much of a coward to stand up to my mother. The company isn't gone, Sienna corrected. It's just not yours anymore. Sign the papers, Preston. Let it go. Will you at least keep the name? Preston asked quietly. Hayes Industries. It's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it from nothing. My father gave his life to it. Can you let it keep the name, please? Sienna looked at Marcus. He shook his head slightly. Bad business to keep a failed family's name. But Margaret tapped the desk, then wrote on a notepad, Small mercy, costs nothing, makes you look magnanimous. The name stays, Sienna said. Hayes Industries continues. Under new ownership, new management, but the legacy remains. Preston's exhale was shaky with relief. Thank you. That means more than you know. The lawyers will send the final documents this morning, Sienna said. Sign them. Don't try to renegotiate. Don't call me again asking for changes. This is the deal. Take it or I walk away and you get nothing. I'll sign. Preston hesitated. Sienna, I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. For all of it. I hope someday you can forgive me. I already have, Sienna said, surprising herself with the truth of it. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You hurt me, Preston. You let your mother brutalize me. That's not something I can forget, even if I forgive it. We're done. Sign the papers and move on with your life. She hung up before he could respond. The study fell silent, except for the ticking of Marcus's antique clock. You forgave him? Margaret asked. I did. Sienna set down her phone. Hating him was exhausting. It was poisoning me. He's weak and he's a coward and he made terrible choices, but holding on to that anger was only hurting me. So I let it go. That's very mature, Margaret said. Also very risky. People interpret forgiveness as permission to hurt you again. Then they'll learn differently, Sienna said. I can forgive Preston and still destroy his world. Both things can be true. Marcus smiled. Now you sound like a Blackwood. The papers arrived at Hayes Industries at 9. By 9:30, Preston had signed everything. By 10, the news broke. Every major business outlet ran the story. Blackwood Holdings acquires Hayes Industries for undisclosed sum. The Hayes family stepping down from all operational roles. New leadership taking over immediately. Stock markets reacted instantly. Hayes Industries shares jumping 40% on the news of the rescue. Creditors breathed easier. Employees started celebrating. And in Virginia, Sienna Blackwood became one of the most powerful business leaders in America. The next 72 hours were chaos. Margaret brought in a team of consultants to begin the restructuring. Lawyers worked around the clock to finalize the debt transfers. Sienna found herself on conference calls at 3 a.m. with bankers in London, creditors and Tokyo suppliers demanding reassurances. She barely slept, living on coffee and adrenaline and the sheer momentum of what she'd set in motion. On the 4th day, she flew back to Chicago, not to hide in a penthouse or sign divorce papers this time. To walk into Hayes Industries headquarters as its new owner. The building looked different from the last time she'd been there, attending some charity function on Preston's arm, invisible and ignored. Now security held the doors open for her. Employees lined the lobby, applauding as she entered. The receptionist, who'd never bothered to learn her name when she was Vivian Hayes, now stood and smiled nervously. Miss Blackwood, welcome. Everyone's waiting for you in the conference room. Sienna rode the elevator to the executive floor with Margaret at her side. Nervous? Margaret asked. Terrified, Sienna admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember you own this building. Everyone in it works for you now. You're not asking for permission anymore. You're giving orders. The conference room was packed. Department heads, senior managers, team leaders, all of them watching as Sienna entered. She recognized a few faces from social functions people who'd looked through her when she was Preston's wife. They weren't looking through her now. She took her seat at the head of the table. Margaret sat to her right. The chair to her left, where Preston would have sat, remained empty, a deliberate choice. Thank you all for coming, Sienna began. I know the last week has been difficult. Uncertainty about the company's future, questions about your jobs, fear about what comes next. I'm here to answer those questions. She paused, making eye contact with as many people as she could. Hayes Industries is not failing anymore. Under Blackwood Holdings ownership, we're restructuring, refinancing, and rebuilding. Most of you will keep your positions. Some of you won't. That's not personal. It's about building a company that works, that's sustainable, that treats its people fairly. A hand went up. One of the senior VPs, a man named Carson, who'd once told Preston that Vivian seemed nice but not very bright. What about the Hayes family? Are they involved at all? No, Sienna said flatly. Preston Hayes, Beatrice Hayes, and Richard Hayes have no operational role in this company anymore. They've been removed from the board, stripped of all decision-making authority, and barred from company premises. This is no longer their company. It's mine. Murmurs spread through the room. Carson shifted uncomfortably. I know some of you are loyal to the Hayes family, Sienna continued. I respect that. They built this company, and that matters, but they also nearly destroyed it. Their management style, their financial decisions, their treatment of employees and partners, all of it led us to the edge of bankruptcy. That ends now. What changes should we expect? Another voice asked. A woman this time, someone from HR. Accountability, Sienna said. Everyone here will be evaluated based on performance, not politics. No more promotions because you're friends with the right people. No more looking the other way when executives harass staff or cut corners. No more leveraging the company's future for short-term gains. We run this place like professionals, or we don't run it at all. Margaret pulled up a presentation on the screen behind them. These are the new organizational charts. As you can see, we've eliminated 3 layers of redundant management. We're promoting from within where possible, bringing in outside talent where necessary. If your name is on this chart, congratulations. If it's not, you have 2 weeks to find another position internally, or we'll provide a generous severance package. The room erupted, people talking over each other, some angry, some relieved, all of them processing the magnitude of the changes. Sienna let them talk for a moment, then raised her hand. Silence fell immediately. I know this is scary, she said. Change always is. But Hayes Industries has been dying slowly for years because people were too comfortable, too protected, too convinced that the Hayes name would save them. It won't. Only competence saves you now, only results. Show me you can do the job, and you'll have a place here. Show me you can't, and you'll have my gratitude and a good reference. But you won't have a desk. Carson stood up. With all due respect, Miss Blackwood, you've never run a company before. You have no experience in manufacturing, no background in our industry. What makes you think you can waltz in here and tell us how to do our jobs? The room went silent. Everyone watched Sienna, waiting for her response. Margaret tensed, ready to intervene. Sienna smiled. You're right, Carson. I've never run a company, but I own 40% of Sterling Group, one of the most successful firms in our sector. I have an MBA from Columbia with a focus on corporate restructuring, and I just saved this company from bankruptcy while the Hayes family watched it burn. So yes, I'm going to waltz in here and tell you how to do your jobs, because my way keeps those jobs from disappearing entirely. Any other questions? Carson sat down, his face red. Good, Sienna said. Margaret will go over the specifics with each department. I'll be in the building all week if anyone needs to speak with me directly. My door is open, literally. I'm taking Preston's old office and removing the door. If you have concerns, bring them to me. If you have ideas, bring those too. We're rebuilding this company together, or we're not rebuilding it at all. She stood, and everyone stood with her. Not out of respect for her necessarily, out of fear maybe, or curiosity, or the simple recognition that the world had shifted and they needed to shift with it or be left behind. Margaret walked her to Preston's office while the staff dispersed. The door still had his name on it, a bronze plaque that would need to be replaced. Inside the space was exactly as he'd left it. Photos of him with various dignitaries, awards for business excellence that rang hollow, now a view of Chicago that had once made Sienna feel small. You really want to remove the door? Margaret asked. I really do, Sienna confirmed. Preston ran this place like a kingdom. I'm running it like a business. That starts with accessibility. You're going to have people in here constantly. Good. Let them come. I've got nothing to hide. Margaret smiled. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. Can't I be both? They spent the rest of the day in meetings. Finance operations, human resources, legal, every department getting their turn. Sienna absorbed information like a sponge, asking questions, challenging assumptions, pushing back when people tried to feed her corporate nonsense. By 6 that evening, her head was pounding, and her voice was hoarse, but she had a clear picture of what she'd inherited. Hayes Industries was worse than the report suggested. Bloated, inefficient, held together by momentum and the Hayes name. 3,000 employees, but at least 500 of them doing redundant or unnecessary work. Contracts with suppliers that hadn't been renegotiated in a decade. Technology so outdated that competitors were running circles around them. Preston hadn't just failed to grow the company. He'd actively let it decay. It's salvageable, Margaret said as they reviewed the day's findings. Barely. You'll need to cut costs by 40%, not 30%. And you'll need to move fast. The creditors gave you breathing room, but they're watching. One misstep, and they'll panic. Then we don't misstep, Sienna said. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoying Preston's office? Hope it was worth destroying my family." Sienna showed it to Margaret. "Beatrice. Almost certainly. She's been quiet until now. I wondered when she'd surface." Sienna typed back, "Your family destroyed itself. I just refused to go down with it." Beatrice's response was immediate. "You're a vindictive little nobody playing dress-up in my son's company. This won't last. You'll fail, and everyone will remember you as the gold digger who got lucky once." "Keep telling yourself that," Sienna wrote. "I'll be too busy running your son's company to notice." She blocked the number after that. Beatrice could rage all she wanted. It didn't change reality. The next morning, Sienna called an all-hands meeting. 3,000 employees packed into the main facility with overflow, watching on screens in the satellite offices. She stood on a makeshift stage, looking out at an ocean of faces, and felt the weight of every one of those lives depending on her decisions. "I'm Sienna Blackwood," she began, her voice amplified through the space. "Most of you don't know me. Some of you knew me as Vivian Hayes Preston's ex-wife. That woman doesn't exist anymore. She was someone I pretended to be for 3 years trying to fit into a world that didn't want her. I'm done pretending." She paused, letting them absorb that. "Hayes Industries almost died. You all know this. The merger failed, the debt came due, and bankruptcy was days away. I bought this company not because I wanted revenge on my ex-husband, though I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. I bought it because 3,000 people shouldn't lose their jobs because of one man's failures." Applause started in the back, spreading forward until the whole facility was clapping. Sienna waited for silence. "But saving the company means changing it," she continued. "Some of you won't like the changes. Some of you will lose your jobs. I won't lie about that. We're carrying 500 positions we don't need, and keeping them means everyone else loses their jobs when we run out of money. So we're making cuts. We're restructuring. We're rebuilding this place from the ground up." The applause had stopped. Now they were just listening, worried. "Here's what I'm offering," Sienna said. "Everyone who loses their position gets 6 months severance, full benefits, and job placement assistance. Everyone who stays gets a salary review within 90 days. If you're underpaid, we fix it. If you're overpaid based on performance, we adjust. Fair compensation for fair work. No more playing favorites. No more politics. Just results." A hand went up in the crowd. Sienna pointed. "Yes. Why should we trust you?" The voice belonged to a young woman, maybe 25. "You've never run a company. You just bought this place a week ago. What makes you different from Preston Hayes?" "I failed," Sienna said simply. "I married the wrong person. I trusted the wrong people. I lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing. Preston Hayes never failed at anything until last week, which is why he didn't know how to handle it. I know what failure looks like. I know what it takes to get back up. And I know that the only way forward is to be honest, even when honesty is brutal." The young woman nodded slowly, satisfied. "Anyone else?" Sienna asked. Dozens of hands went up. For the next hour, Sienna took questions. Some hostile, some hopeful, all of them testing her. She answered honestly, admitting when she didn't know something promising to find out when she couldn't answer on the spot. By the end, the crowd wasn't exactly enthusiastic. But they weren't mutinous either. They were cautiously willing to give her a chance. That evening, Sienna returned to the hotel exhausted. She'd moved into a suite at the peninsula for the duration of the restructuring, turning the living room into a makeshift war room. Margaret was already there reviewing termination lists. 520 positions eliminated, Margaret said without preamble. "I've marked the ones that are going to cause problems. Union issues, potential lawsuits, people with connections who'll make noise." Sienna reviewed the list. "Do what's right, not what's easy. If someone needs to go, they go. We'll handle the fallout." "There's one name you need to see." Margaret pointed to an entry near the bottom. "Executive Vice President of Operations, James Chen. He's been here 20 years. Very popular, very connected. Also completely incompetent. He's been coasting on relationships while his department bleeds money." "Fire him," Sienna said. "His wife is on the charity board with half of Chicago's elite. His brother is a state senator. Firing him will make enemies." "Then we make enemies?" Sienna said. "We're not running a popularity contest. We're running a company." Margaret smiled. "You're learning fast." The terminations began the next day. Sienna insisted on delivering the news personally to the senior executives, refusing to hide behind HR or email. She sat across from James Chen in his office and told him directly that his position was being eliminated, that his performance hadn't justified his compensation, that effective immediately he was no longer employed by Hayes Industries. Chen took it badly. "You're making a huge mistake. I have friends, Miss Blackwood, important friends. You'll regret this." "Maybe," Sienna said, "but you'll still be unemployed." He left threatening legal action. Margaret waved it off. "He has no case. Let him waste his money on lawyers." One by one, the terminations proceeded. Some people took it gracefully, others raged, a few cried. Sienna sat through all of it, forcing herself to witness the consequences of her decisions. This was the cost of leadership. This was what it meant to be responsible for other people's lives. By the end of the week, Hayes Industries had 500 fewer employees and a leaner, meaner organizational structure. The remaining staff worked harder, aware that incompetence would no longer be tolerated. Productivity started climbing immediately. Costs began dropping. The financial bleeding slowed to a trickle. And then, Tiffany Sterling showed up at Sienna's office unannounced. Security called up first. "Miss Blackwood, there's a Tiffany Sterling here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insisting it's urgent." Sienna glanced at Margaret, who shrugged. "Might as well see what she wants. Could be entertaining." "Send her up," Sienna said. Tiffany arrived looking less polished than at the gala. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup minimal, her expression tight with stress. She stood in the doorway of Preston's former office, taking in Sienna behind his desk. The Hayes family photos removed, the space transformed. "You really did it," Tiffany said quietly. "You took everything." "Not everything," Sienna corrected. "Just what was offered to me. What do you want, Tiffany?" "To understand." Tiffany stepped inside, closing the door, despite the fact that Sienna had removed it. She'd propped it against the wall as a statement, but clearly Tiffany wanted privacy. Why destroy Preston? He loved you. He made mistakes, but he loved you. "He didn't love me," Sienna said. "He loved the idea of me, the waitress he rescued, the grateful wife who owed him everything. The moment I stopped being grateful, stopped being small, he threw me away. That's not love, Tiffany. That's ownership." "And what you did to him is justice." Tiffany's voice rose. "You humiliated him. You took his company. You destroyed his future. That's not justice. That's revenge." "It's consequences," Sienna said calmly. "Preston borrowed money he couldn't repay. He bet his company on a merger he hadn't secured. He put 3,000 jobs at risk because of his ego. I just refused to bail him out. If that destroyed him, he destroyed himself." Tiffany's hands clenched into fists. "He's broken Sienna, completely broken. He won't leave his apartment, won't answer calls. His mother is having a breakdown and his father is talking about selling their house to cover debts. You won. You completely won. Can't you show some mercy?" "I am showing mercy," Sienna said. "I kept the Hayes Industries name. I'm keeping the employees. I'm paying Preston's debts. If I wanted revenge, I'd have let everything burn and walked away. Instead, I'm spending 18-hour days saving what he built. That's more mercy than he showed me." Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. "I know what Beatrice did to you. I heard. I'm sorry for that. It was wrong. But Preston didn't hit you. He didn't hurt you physically." "No," Sienna agreed. "He just watched while his mother did, which is worse. At least Beatrice was honest about her hatred. Preston pretended to love me while doing nothing to protect me. That kind of betrayal, Tiffany. That cuts deeper than any slap." "So what now?" Tiffany asked. "You run his company, live his life, take everything he built." "I don't want his life," Sienna said. "I'm building my own. Hayes Industries is just one piece. I have Sterling Group Blackwood Holdings and about a dozen other ventures Marcus wants me to oversee. Preston's company is actually the smallest part of my empire." The word empire hung in the air. Tiffany's face went pale. "You're serious," she whispered. "This isn't about him anymore. It never really was." "It stopped being about Preston the moment I signed those divorce papers," Sienna said. "Everything after that was about me, about who I want to be, what I want to build, how I want to live. Preston is just someone I used to know. He's not even interesting enough to hate anymore." Tiffany turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. Terrifying, but extraordinary. Preston never deserved you." "I know," Sienna said. "That's why I left." After Tiffany was gone, Margaret looked up from her laptop. "That was surprisingly civil." "She's not my enemy," Sienna said. "She's just someone who backed the wrong horse." "What about Beatrice? When she comes, and she will come, will you be civil with her?" Sienna thought about Beatrice's hand cracking across her face, her fingers in Sienna's hair, her voice dripping with venom. "No," she said simply. "Beatrice gets no mercy, ever." 3 weeks later, Sienna stood in front of the Chicago Business Council. 200 of the city's most powerful executives filled the room, all of them watching her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and hostility. She wore navy blue professional and understated with her grandmother's diamond studs. Power that didn't need to announce itself. "Thank you for inviting me," she began. "I know most of you are wondering who I am and why you should care. Fair questions. Let me answer them." She clicked to the first slide. Hayes Industries' financial trajectory, the nosedive under Preston, the stabilization under her leadership. 3 weeks ago, this company was days from bankruptcy. Today, we're profitable. We cut costs by 42%, eliminated redundant positions, renegotiated supplier contracts, and implemented new efficiency protocols. Revenue is up 18%. Employee satisfaction is up 30%. Stock price has doubled. Murmurs spread through the room. She had their attention. "I didn't do this by being nice," Sienna continued. "I did it by being honest. I fired 500 people. I terminated executives with decades of seniority. I made enemies of powerful families. And I'd do it again because saving a company sometimes means burning the parts that are already dead." She clicked to the next slide. Sterling Group's portfolio, then Blackwood Holdings' global reach. "I'm not just Hayes Industries. I control 40% of Sterling Group, and I'm the primary heir to Blackwood Holdings. Between these 3 entities, I have influence over approximately 70,000 employees and $200 billion in assets. I'm 27 years old, and I'm just getting started." The room was silent now. She had them. "Why am I telling you this?" Sienna asked. "Because Chicago's business community needs to understand something. The old rules don't apply anymore. Legacy names don't protect you. Family connections don't save you. Results matter. Ethics matter. Treating people with dignity matters. The executives who forgot that are gone. The companies that forget it will follow." She paused, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to build something that lasts. If you want to be part of that, my door is open. If you want to be an obstacle, get out of my way, because I've been underestimated before. It didn't end well for the people who made that mistake." She closed her presentation and opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up immediately. For 90 minutes, they grilled her. Hostile questions, probing questions, attempts to trap her in contradictions. She handled all of it calm and confident, proving she knew her business inside and out. By the end, even the skeptics looked grudgingly impressed. Afterward, a dozen executives approached her with business cards and offers to meet. She accepted them politely, knowing most would lead nowhere. But a few might be genuine. A few might become allies. Marcus was waiting in the car outside. "How did it go?" "I think I scared them," Sienna said. "Good," Marcus smiled. "Scared is better than dismissed. Scared means they're taking you seriously." They drove back to the airport in comfortable silence. Sienna looked out at Chicago, passing by the city that had broken her and rebuilt her into something stronger. She'd come here as Vivian Carter, a waitress looking for love. She'd left as Vivian Hayes, a discarded wife with nothing. And now she was leaving as Sienna Blackwood, a force that Chicago would remember. The Gulf Stream lifted off at sunset, climbing through golden light toward home. Sienna watched Chicago disappear below her, getting smaller and smaller, until it was just lights in the darkness. Somewhere down there, Preston was trying to rebuild his life. Beatrice was plotting her revenge. Tiffany was moving on to her next opportunity. The world was spinning without her, and she didn't need to be part of it anymore. She had her own world to build. Marcus broke the silence. "I'm proud of you. Your grandmother would be too." "Tell me about her," Sienna said. "The real stories, not the sanitized versions." So Marcus did. For the next hour, he told her about Eleanor Blackwood, the woman who'd built half their empire and taken no prisoners doing it. Eleanor had been brilliant, ruthless, and impossibly kind to the people who earned her loyalty. She'd destroyed competitors and donated millions to charity. She'd been feared and loved in equal measure. "You're like her," Marcus said finally. "More than you know. She was willing to burn bridges to build empires. So are you." "Is that a good thing?" "It's a necessary thing," Marcus said. "Nice people don't change the world, Sienna. Determined people do. Eleanor understood that. Now you do too." When they landed at the Virginia estate, the staff was waiting, not with applause this time, with quiet respect. Sienna had left as Marcus's granddaughter, a woman rebuilding after a divorce. She was returning as something more, a leader, an executive, someone who'd taken on Chicago's elite and won. Mrs. Chen hugged her at the door. "Welcome home, Miss Sienna. We're so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without all of you," Sienna said. And she meant it. This house, this family, these people who'd believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. They'd given her a foundation to rebuild on. That night, Sienna stood in her room looking at her reflection. The woman in the mirror was someone she barely recognized from a month ago. Stronger, harder, more certain. The scared girl who'd signed divorce papers with trembling hands was gone. In her place stood Sienna Blackwood, CEO, majority shareholder woman, who'd turned her greatest failure into her greatest triumph. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Preston. "I heard your speech to the Business Council. You were magnificent. I'm sorry I never saw that in you when we were together. I hope you find someone who does." Sienna read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Preston didn't get to congratulate her. He didn't get to be part of her story anymore. He was a chapter she'd closed, a lesson she'd learned, a mistake she'd survived. She opened her laptop and pulled up the files Margaret had sent. Strategic plans for Hayes Industries expansion. Proposals for new Sterling Group initiatives. Investment opportunities Marcus wanted her to evaluate. Work that would fill the next year of her life challenges, that would test everything she'd learned. She smiled and started reading. 3 months later, Hayes Industries posted its first quarterly profit in 5 years. Sienna was on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Bloomberg Businessweek. The headlines varied, but the message was the same. The underestimated ex-wife had become the woman everyone was watching. Preston sent flowers. She donated them to a women's shelter. Beatrice tried to sue for defamation. The case was dismissed in 3 weeks. Tiffany got engaged to a venture capitalist. Sienna sent a polite congratulations note. And Sienna Blackwood kept building, kept pushing, kept proving that being underestimated was the greatest gift anyone could give her because it meant they'd never see her coming until it was too late. She'd walked into that penthouse as a woman with nothing and walked out as a woman who'd learned the most valuable lesson of all: power isn't given, it's taken, and the only person who can stop you from taking it is yourself. Preston Hayes had tried to erase her. Instead, he'd freed her to become exactly who she was always meant to be, and that in the end was the best revenge of all.